This week on the grid, we have Joe McNally here on a Blast from the Past episode where we're looking at inspirational stuff that Joe's going to be talking about, and it all starts in just 60 seconds.
The grid is brought to you by Tamron. Check out their 28 to 75 millimeter f2.8 lens. It's for Sony full-frame mirrorless. It's awesome. Go to tamron-usa.com.
And ProPhoto, the light shaping company. Check out the ProPhoto B1X, powered all the right places. Go to prophoto.com/US.
And Platypod, the tripod alternative that is changing the world. Everybody has a Platypod. You should too. Go to platypod.com.
Well, hey, Grid Nation, how you doing? It's just me, Erik, on the show. You're going, where's Joe McNally? You talked about Joe McNally. Well, Joe is coming. We have an episode from the past where a lot of viewers loved that episode, so we're going to replay that. Scott is out at his new tour, his Ultimate Photography Crash Course, so he's out doing that. So we wanted to have Joe. Joe is a Kelby 1 instructor, and he's also going to be teaching at Photoshop World in Vegas, which is coming up really soon. So if you're interested in going to Photoshop World Vegas, that's in the middle of August. It's August 21st through the 23rd. And you just go to photoshopworld.com, check it out there. Joe's going to be teaching, and we wanted to give you a little glimpse into, who Joe is, what he teaches, that kind of stuff. And this was a great episode from the past where Joe was on it and talked a lot of inspirational stuff. A lot of people got stuff out of it. So, obviously if you watched it before, it's definitely something that you could definitely watch again. But if you haven't watched it, this is a great episode. After the episode, we're going to come back and we're going to be giving away some giveaways. We've got the landscape photography book by Scott Kelby. His new landscape book. It is blowing up on Amazon, so definitely want to check that out. And then we're also giving away a Platypod Ultra. So we got that. So after the episode, we're going to be coming back here. If there's any questions you guys have at the end, just feel free. So we're going to flip it over now to the Blast from the Past, the rerun episode of the Joe McNally episode.
We are very excited to have a man whose name is synonymous with festering boils. No? An HDR specialist.
Okay.
Renowned for his HDR work.
Absolutely.
The one, the only, Joe McNally.
How's it going?
How you doing, buddy?
All right, how are you?
So, Joe, you just literally walked in from the field.
I did.
1 minute before showtime.
We were out shooting a class. It's going to be, out soon. It's on Motion. So we were literally kind of out in the woods and kind of a swampy, wooded area, like an hour and a half away, and we just made it.
I mean, I'm calling Joe and I'm driving in like, Joe, we're going on at 4. Well, we're going to make it. I'll be there in 5 minutes.
No, true. But we had a good production meeting. I was on a cell phone in a moving vehicle. You were like, what are we going to do today on the grid? And I thought it was complete. I think we're ready.
You didn't see this today because you're working, but I sent out tweets and things today that said, our guest today is Joe McNally. Our topic, who cares? It's freaking Joe McNally. Oh. So we actually kind of have a topic that Joe and I kind of came up with at the last minute. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But first I got to say something. Now, you're going to cringe through this. So you may look the other way while I talk about this because I know how you are. Because you're a very humble guy.
Okay.
Last night we did an event called Behind the Lens with Joe McNally. It was kind of an evening with Joe, and we were taping it for a class we're doing at Kelby 1. And I'm going to sum up the whole night like this. So we were there the class was 2 hours, something long. At least.
Kind of went from 7 to 9:30.
Yeah, 2.5 hours long, right? During this time, I just want to say, Joe never touched a camera, never touched a flash, never showed one of his own images, and got the biggest standing ovation. It was a magical night. It was, I did this class, and I was there helping Joe, but it was like I was helping Jay when we did a day with Jay Maisel. That was a very special, a very unique class. And it's one of those things that could only happen that night with Jay that day with the people that were around us in New York. That's what happened last night in your class. It was brilliant. It was magical. There were times where we were all in tears, yourself included. There were times where people were rolling on the floor laughing, but it was a learning experience that was just, it was really something.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. And also, I mean, it's kind of just a cool thing that has occurred in the length of a career photographically. You mentioned the class you did with Jay, and yeah. Jay is Jay. Jay is unique. He is a resource. He's a treasure. And I consider him a friend and a mentor. I've been to his workshop in New York City, and I wrote a paper about Jay in school.
Wow.
And so now, coming full circle, 35 years later, to call him a colleague and a friend, and then the both of us participating here at Kelby One, that's like one of the hidden gifts you get out of just kind of hanging in there, in this field. It's just a pleasure to know that, somehow I have this relationship. I could go to Jay and ask his opinion. I could seek his counsel, his wisdom. It's an amazing thing.
It is, but all the things that you said about Jay are the same for you. And last night, I mean, you prove it again and again and again, but I'm sitting there. There were times where we had people coming up and you were doing live critiques one-on-one with people. And I'm sitting down in the audience, I'm just listening. I'm like, and you know what? I was talking to Joe about this last night. The further you are along in your photographic career, or the further you are along in learning Photoshop or Lightroom, whatever it is, the less you learn. You get to a point where when you just like start with photography and you go to a class on how to run your camera, you walk out of a 1 hour class with 50 things, right? Mm-hmm. When you've been shooting for 10 years, you come out of a class, if you're lucky, with 1 or 2 things. I learned 100 things last night. I mean, it was just, we were tweeting the things you were saying. I mean, it was really just an amazing night. We have some behind the scenes photos, if we can show some of them, just a couple of shots from last night. I don't know if maybe we're showing them while we were talking. We'll never really know. Let's see. And here they come now. See, there they are. Okay, so this is Joe naked. This is with his shirt off. I'm waiting for someone to say that they're coming or not. I'm just making up stuff at this point because we just keep seeing each other. Yeah, look at the red circle.
Oh, the red thing. Okay,
yeah.
All right.
It's a trick. Don't look at the screen of us, because then we're all kind of looking like we see a screen over there.
Okay, so I look at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, here we go. All right, so these are some behind the scenes photos from last night. So this is back from the production area. You can see this is our crew there. Here's kind of an overhead shot there. Then, by the way, these stills are from Brad Moore, who's an event photographer. That's why they look so freaking good. Here's Meredith. She's our director, and she did an amazing job back there. We had crews and cameras, all kinds of cool stuff everywhere. And here's Joe in the middle of a mid-critique saying, "I'm sorry, you suck." That's what he was. No, he was not. You were very gracious considering.
Well, I think, the work was interesting. It was provocative on a lot of different levels, and some things needed work and some things were excellent. I mean, it's just like, it's the story of any photographer.
Yep. No, there was that woman, you made her night. Even while you were critiquing her work, you had some really great information for her. She is a person that came in a pretty good shooter.
Yeah.
And left with a path of what to do next.
And she was a nice lady.
Very nice.
Really nice lady.
So that's you, Joe. And I'll tell you what, you were so flatulent at times during the night. It was really...
Well, you took me out for that double beef bean burrito right before we went.
I know, that was a mistake. People are asking when this will be up on Kelby One. I was told last night they hope to have it up in 3 weeks, which they think, 3 weeks? Why does it take 3 weeks? Because there's a lot to it. We had a lot of cameras going last night. Just to piece it all together, it takes a lot of time. Plus, this isn't the only thing our video crew is doing. We just released a Creative Cloud training month at Kelby One. So a class is going up every single weekday for the entire month of February. So they have their hands really full. And so we also give free previews. Yeah, like we have our premiere Creative Cloud Basics one up there. So there's like 1.5 million people now subscribed to the Creative Cloud. So we thought, we better get some training out there.
Wow.
So anyway, so they're doing all that stuff, but in the middle of it, of course, we still want to provide some amazing classes. And I want to thank you for everybody that's going to watch your class. I know this class is going to explode the numbers, and I know that you're going to get an outpouring of love, because what you did last night was, it was one of those nights where you had to be there. On that night, it was just crazy. But our cameras were there to capture it. I'm very excited. I don't want to go too long because we want to talk to Joe some more. Do want to mention Photoshop World's coming up. You're teaching at Photoshop World in Atlanta?
I am, yeah, and I'm looking forward to it because Photoshop World's never been in Atlanta that I know about, so it's kind of cool, new venue. I'll be doing my usual pre-con, characters on location. We're going to assemble a bunch of interesting folks and take them and create studio sets and work everybody through big flash, small flash, hot lights, all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, I'm teaching, some small flash basics and advanced stuff, and just doing the Photoshop World thing. I look forward to it twice a year. It's like a high point of the year. It's wonderful.
And you know what else, too? If you go to Photoshop World, one of the cool things is you'll get to meet Joe, because Joe's everywhere all over Photoshop World. Everywhere you look, there's Joe. So I hope you'll go check it out at photoshopworld.com.
Can I say one thing about, those stills from last night were really, really good. And Brad shot them, Brad Moore. And as you know, Brad used to be my assistant.
Yep.
Now he's working here at Kelby One.
Yeah.
And so the mentorship thing, the whole path works, because in one day, just this week, Brad had the cover of the Rolling Stone, kind of web thing with his rock and roll photography.
Yeah, he did.
And Drew Gurian, who took Brad's place at my studio, who has now gone on to his own career, got mentioned in a blog post on Pocket Wizard. And now Callie has stepped up and taken Drew's place as our studio. And then we have a great second assistant, John Cospito, who's stepped up and taken Callie's place. So this whole mentorship thing that you are engaged in, really, with training and education and photography, works.
Well, working for Joe McNally didn't hurt anybody. That's like, it's the part to the end of the rainbow. But anyway, Joe, we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to kind of talk about a theme off of last night that was kind of interesting, and Joe's going to have some images to show. We have some giveaways real quick. I did mention Photoshop World. Go to photoshopworld.com. If you sign up now, it's $100 off. So if you sign up, I think it was before March 1st, it's $100 off. It's our first time in Atlanta. You know what's great about Atlanta? It's Delta's hub. You can get to Atlanta so easy from everywhere in the world. So I hope you'll come and join us. It's an amazing experience. It's called Photoshop World, but man, there's a ton of photography there. There's whole tracks on lighting. There's whole tracks on just photography technique. There's whole tracks on inspiration. Even though it's Photoshop World, we have tons of Photoshop and Lightroom. There's tons of photography stuff. Mazel's there.
Yeah.
Peter Hurley's there.
Yep.
Yeah. If you can think of a big name that you would love to learn from, they're there. Giveaways. We're going to give away my latest book, Photoshop for, what's it called? Photoshop for Lightroom users. Who wrote this? Photoshop for Lightroom users. So this is a book that it's very thin. One of the thinnest books I've ever written. Look at that. Thin. Because I only cover the stuff that a photographer needs to know about Photoshop. You don't learn all of Photoshop, but you learn exactly what Lightroom doesn't do. We're giving away 2 copies of that today. And we're going to give away a full conference pass to Photoshop World. Full conference pass.
Wow.
It's like $600 or something.
That's cool.
But we'll give that away today. And can we give away one of your...
Absolutely.
And we're going to give away a signed copy of Joe's... Moment It Clicks?
Moment It Clicks, sounds good.
We'll do the Moment It Clicks. So we'll be giving those a little bit later. We're going to talk to Joe in a minute, but we're going to go take a real quick break. It's like 30 seconds, maybe 36 seconds. While we're doing this, if you would be so kind as to just put it out on Facebook, put it on Twitter. Hey, come watch The Grid right now. It's live. We would be very appreciative. So thank you in advance for doing that. We'll be right back here live with Joe McNally on The Grid. Don't go away.
Bad weather strikes and threatens your next outdoor shoot, you need the experience. The experience of a photographer that can handle any situation.
Get your hair out of your eyes! Come on!
The experience of Joe McNally.
Bad weather doesn't mean you can turn in a bad shoot. It's really bad weather out here, Harry! I'm not gonna leave this dock without a picture.
Trust Joe to teach you the tips you'll need to capture stunning photos even when the weather turns ugly.
Anybody there see the sun? I don't.
Don't let bad weather ruin your next.
I'm happy again. What am I supposed to out here? Sing a chorus of I Feel Pretty?
Don't let bad weather ruin your next photo shoot.
Telling people what is perfectly obvious, that the weather sucks.
Rely on Joe McNally to help you weather the storm.
The miracle of photography visits us again. We are.
Learn how to take great photos in bad weather. Watch Joe McNally.
Whoa, was that the same cow?
County his whole life. Hey, we are back. Scott Kelby here with Joe McNally. Hey, Peach Pit, one of the sponsors of the show, and I love all of our sponsors. They actually give our readers a deal that you get 40% off, and we got a brand new book for Lindsay Adler. Lindsay Adler wrote a book called Creative 52. And if you go to peachpit.com/Kelby1 and enter the code Kelby1, you get her book for 40% off, which is like $16 and some change, which is very inexpensive considering everything in photography is insanely expensive. This is something that's relatively inexpensive. Anyway, so Joe, I want to set you up for something. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
So last night, a big part of the night was Joe doing one-on-one critiques. We would actually have people come up out of the audience. We had a couple of blind critiques, but I think the real highlight of the night was having Joe one-on-one with people on stage and really going through their images. And I thought you did a brilliant job of being very truthful and very helpful at the same time. Okay. You know, you weren't mean to anyone, and but you were very, very truthful. And some of the funniest moments of the night were when an image came up and you're going through and the person's sitting right there and the image comes up and you just looked at them. You didn't even say anything. You just like, come on. They were like, yeah, I know I shouldn't have sent that one. It was really cute. But anyway, but here's what happened. So because Joe is a people person, almost all of the images that were submitted, except for maybe one, were people photos.
Right.
And there was a trend. So when Joe was talking to people, it didn't matter who it was, and there were some very good photographers there last night. There was a wide range of people, but there was, a lot of good shooters there. But the common theme, I would say, of the night was, as you're looking at these people's photos, they would take a picture of somebody, and you would go, you just didn't take it far enough. They're just kind of, it's a model, and she's just standing there. Or it's a person and I don't know anything about them. Your photo doesn't tell me anything about the person. And it was a very, very common theme throughout the night. And so we were driving home last night and I'm talking to Joe, and Joe's drinking and stuff. And so I said, Joe, was there really any shot tonight that you saw that you would go, yeah, that one nailed it? And he was like, there really wasn't. And there were a lot of good photos. There were photos with good lighting. They were photos with attractive people. There were, and they were photos with interesting people, but you were looking for that next step. And so that's what I was hoping we could dedicate today's show to, is helping people understand what it is. Like when you say, I need more from this photo, what does that mean? And I think, I don't want to show their photos. I don't want to rehash what we did last night, because what we did last night was very, very different from this. But I think if we could get a little bit inside your head, Joe, and have you show us, when I mean go further and capture that, make me want to know more about this person, get me something in their face that tells me more about them. Because a lot of them, you were right. And as I was sitting there watching, I'm going, yeah, you're right. I don't know anything about this person. This is a boxer. This is a rodeo guy. This is whatever. But you didn't know anything about them. There was just, I walked by and I set up a light, click. So, and that's what I'm hoping that you could do for us today. Number one, I want to learn it. And I think a lot of our viewers would love to really have a better idea. Oh, so that's what we're going for.
Well, it's a hard thing to estimate and absolutely identify that sort of quotient of emotion or feeling, information, the mix of it, the emotional impact you have on someone, how you intrigue someone with your picture. And as you say, there were a lot of, really wonderful photographs last night. They were graphically pleasing. They had, as you indicate, good snap, good light, good this, good that. But I think, and this is naturally just a byproduct of the way I was raised up photographically, being a newspaper wire service photographer, then a magazine photographer, is to tell stories. And I think what happens, especially at a certain point in every photographer's career, and I've certainly gone through this and been guilty of it, and still am guilty of it, is that we get, I think, a little bit more or too much involved in our technique, and we kind of forget about the real reason we're there, which is to photograph another human being in an effective way. And when I say effective, that gets beyond the bits and pieces, the mechanics, the gears. I'm looking to see if a photograph has sinew and muscle and tonality and human stuff, as opposed to just being technically well done. So, and when we dive into that pool of mechanics, we're worried about our exposure, we're worried about our light, we're, the post-processing, all these various elements, we come up occasionally, at least, with pictures that are ornamentally sort of beautiful or nice looking, but just kind of like a piece of, kind of cheap pottery kind of sits there on the desk, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But if it falls off and it cracks and breaks, nobody really cares about it, So
Where do you come up with these? That's a great analogy. That's
it's not like a family heirloom,
Right.
So I think the age of digital and the internet and the fast quality of it has not necessarily robbed people of the storytelling abilities that they might have, but certainly it's involved with our attention span. We're guilty. We sit here and we're like, oh, fast, right. And we get used to like, oh, that's, this one-off, this picture that looks nice, but doesn't take me further, doesn't really take me into someone's life. And one of the intriguing things I always have found about having a photographic career is that the camera can provide an entree into someone's life. And so I did counsel, I think, a couple times last night, like, go back to this person.
Yeah, you did.
Cycle back on things. This photograph, as intriguing or pleasant as it might be, is just a first step.
Yeah.
Get deeper. Go further.
So the goal's not just to create a pleasant photo.
Yeah, no, I mean, those abound, right?
Right.
But and the truly special photos, whoa, those are hard to come by. Those are few and far between. The truly great photographers of our life and times, people that we know about, the Eisenstats of the world, some of the great shooters that came out of Life and Geographic and Magnum and whatnot. You look at the range of their entire life, and there's maybe, 30 or 40 truly great pictures out of a lifetime of photography. Now, they've shot other excellent stuff, nice stuff, good stuff, etc., all those kinds of things. But those photographs that you really hang on to and remember, man, those are hard to come by. So that's a mission, I think, for all of us, and it should maybe drive us. And I think what is an absolutely important piece of equipment in your bag right next to your 70 to 200 or whatever is an absolutely unabated, essential sense of curiosity. As soon as I can get my hands on somebody photographically, and I make that first snap, I want to know more. I really would like to get further involved. So, and that means time and patience behind the lens.
Now, two things. Last night, I think it was really, I guess, surprising to me on some level, but not, was that you didn't talk a whole lot about lighting, and you didn't talk about the things that people can control easily. Mm-hmm. And that's what I thought was so brilliant about it. I think when things are going to change somebody, when it's going to change somebody's way of photography, it can't be you need to use a different softbox. But I think that's what we want it to be, because that's very easy. I'll just order the bigger softbox.
Sure.
But last night, the way you were really drawing us into the really important stuff, and I guess that's what I'm hoping we can do in this show, and you've already started to do it, so God bless you, man, is to really let us know when we're looking at our own photo that we know, what, and I'm thinking of my own photos as you're talking last night, and I'm going, oh crap, because I know so many shots where I've made a pleasant photo now, and I'm like, you don't know anything more about this person. I didn't go to that next level. And I would say that I am hyper aware of it today, where I was not when I woke up yesterday. So after last night and going through that experience, and you guys will, the Kelby One subscribers out there, you'll get to go through this experience and see the whole thing. But that's number one. But Joe, and someone's asking a question about this, and I kind of want to bring this up. And I'm gonna put you a little on the spot when I say this. But when you were talking about spend some extra time with somebody. Mm-hmm. Joe, you don't know how hard that is. And here's why. Because when you show up, you can go, hi, I'm Joe McNally. I'm doing a piece for National Geographic. I just want to shoot you for a few minutes. That person will go, absolutely. Now, so when you're with a magazine, whether you're a newspaper, you have a legitimate reason. For the rest of us, we're creepy guy with a camera. And like last night, you were looking at this young man's image, and you really liked the subject matter. Okay. And you were saying, you got to go spend a few more minutes with him and stuff. Luckily, he lived in that guy's neighborhood, and he might be able to go back to him. But Joe, if I'd have gotten 2 frames of that guy, I'd have been gone. I don't have that thing. But Joe, I saw you do a thing in St. Lucia that I was telling the guys about. We were down in St. Lucia doing a workshop. It was Joe's workshop, and I was the guest. And I think I taught this much, and Joe taught that much. But we ran across a fire station in St. Lucia, and luckily one of the firemen recognized me. And he's like, oh my gosh, I watched the grid, and you're in this little island. The last thing you think is going to happen. And he's like, oh my God, I love you and RC and Joe. And I go, Joe's right around the corner. And I thought his head was going to explode. I thought he was going to just. Anyway, but so you came into this fire station and we talked to the guy. Now you got to realize this is a fire station full of guys in a foreign country. Mm-hmm. The one guy who's a junior guy, Garvey,
yeah,
good guy, right?
Yeah, Garvey Charlemagne.
So Garvey, he's like a junior guy, and he's a fireman. He's the real deal, but he's not the captain of the place. Mm-hmm. Joe, you went in there and you were having them move trucks and stuff, and they were doing it so willingly. There was you have a way that goes beyond. You weren't on assignment, but you're able to walk into a situation and go, everybody stop. You move this truck over here. I need you and your outfit. Let's line up here. And everybody just goes, yes, sir. That comes from 30 years of being able to go, I'm from National Geographic. I'm from Time. I'm from Life. How do we do this, Joe? How do I get 20 minutes with that guy? How do I get 15 minutes with him? I'm watching you say that last night. I'm going, yes, that's what I need. Give me 10 minutes with that guy. How do we get 10 minutes with him? If we don't have 30 years behind us, and we're not that guy. How do we do it?
I see where you're. I mean, there's no two ways about it. That when you have a publication at your back, you can gain entree to certain worlds that might be denied to just a guy with a camera. And there's been lots of times in my career that I'm just a guy with a camera. So I think that. And this is going to sound, forgive me for being a little bit, kind of uncertain of my language here as I approach this, but I think if you are completely open with people, I'm a big believer in disclosure. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. This is what I need. This is what I'd like to do. And you display an essential sense of curiosity, of honesty, of purpose with people. I think they will be inclined to open their doors. And then that picture becomes another picture, and then the next picture becomes another picture. And there is, I think, a relationship that starts when you have someone in front of a camera. And it's again one of those, it's like Quicksilver, it's hard to put your fingers on and catch it and say, I can reproduce this all the time. You can't. I've been turned down lots of times when I've asked people to become their documentarian even for a few minutes. I think that one of the things that when you are motivated in a certain direction, photographically, you have a passion for it. The things that assist you in this regard are the digital world that we live in. You can draw up your website. Here, I photograph dance. Okay, and I don't do it necessarily for publication. I do it for the sense of beauty and the sense of appreciation for what dancers do. And here's my website. Well, it never used to be that you had a website that you could just call up on your iPhone and say, here, and that can be a business card, if you will, a very powerful one that you lay down on the table. You make an arrangement with people, that you have, that they will have full access to your images. You also present the notion or the substantial evidence that you are going to be the good shepherd of their image, that nothing is going to happen to them. Nothing bad will happen to them from the act of your taking their photograph.
How do you communicate that?
I think an open face.
Yeah, you do it with you have a presence. You do. You make people trust you. And I was telling RC, when I sat in that fire station, and you would say, I need this truck moved. These guys were jumping in the truck and moving it as though you were the chief of the fire department. But you have a presence.
Well, they were enthusiastic about our presence. Absolutely.
We walked up in the middle of the day.
Well, but it creates a debt on both sides, and I still am in touch with Garvey. I go to that fire station every year. After that horrible hurricane, we assisted them. We sent them a pretty sizable check. And then the next year, it's like this relationship. It's like having like dating somebody almost, and you're getting more serious. The next year, Garvey came to me and said, we used that money to buy additional rescue equipment, and he gave me 3 or 4 shirts. And they were all signed by members of his fire department. He goes, these were shirts that we wore during an actual rescue. And we've signed them for you, and we want to give them to you. And man, that's like a better than any handshake you could get. And so I think one of the things that I've seen over time with photographers, even photographers who don't have a publication at their back, is length of time, patience, friendship, ongoing relationship, and it's like the rings around a tree. The project that you're engaged in, the amount of, or the photography that you're heading, that's heading in that direction for you, it gets richer, deeper, more complex, more evolved, more storytelling, and you find yourself coming full circle. I mean, I experienced it after 9/11. I've kept the pictures I shot on 9/11, I've been the good shepherd of those pictures. And then when life asked me to go back and do a 10-year retrospective, those folks let me back into their lives.
They sure did.
Because I hadn't done anything bad to them. They didn't see it like advertising, their picture advertising sportswear in Macy's or something
right.
I firmly believe in relationship building as a photographer, and sometimes it can start slowly, and other times it can be accelerated, but most of the time it is like building blocks. That's why I always encourage young photographers, you don't have to go to Afghanistan or Tibet or Siberia to get good pictures. Identify things that are accessible to you, that are near to you, that you love, that you're interested or curious about, and then start to make that happen. Okay, even on a simple level, the guy who, maybe you go to the same bakery every morning before you go to, and there's some guy back there who's always like making the bagels and the donuts or something like that. Well, I'm automatically intrigued by that. Do you think I could ever come by and maybe spend a day with you? That's also a thing that we get sort of seduced by or get into, like the workflow of, it's like we all get on the conveyor belt. We got to do a portrait. Okay, set up the light, do this. Okay, portrait, click. And thank you very much. That was really nice. I really have a nice looking portrait. And that's it. Well, don't do that. I mean, maybe that's a component. I could show you a couple things, maybe that's a component of a story, but if I were going to do this baker dude, for instance, I would spend all day. I would say, hey, could I meet you tomorrow morning in the dead of night when you come to work at 3:30 in the morning? You have to walk in their shoes, and they have to feel that willingness, and once they start to think like, wow, this guy's actually like really into this, you're celebrating them. It's a way of celebrating who they are, what they do.
Wow. Joe, I want to see, you just mentioned showing some images, and I really want to do that. We got a lot of questions coming in. Can I run over some of these real quick with you?
Sure.
And also, Brad, can you move the screen over that way? I'll tell you what, let's take a short break. because I can't read some of these things because the screen is overlapping another screen on top of another screen. There we go. Thank you. Let's take a short break. We're going to answer some of your questions. I want to see some of your examples. We're really glad to have you here, Joe. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Welcome everybody, RC here. Welcome to Exposing HDR here on Kelby Training. Now, the best place for you to do all of this stuff is going to be in this room.
He's back.
Go away! Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go!
Hey, we're back. Scott Kelby. Man, that was a fast commercial. Scott Kelby here with Joe McNally. We're taking your questions right now. Let's head right into them. Ben asks, how do you know when you've taken it far enough? Isn't it according to each person's taste?
I'm having a hard time kind of completely understanding the question. Whose taste? Your viewer or the person you're photographing? You know, the person you're photographing is going to give you signs of what is within bounds and what is out of bounds.
Well, if they're going by what we said, where you said, we're talking about the images we looked at yesterday, and you're like, you need to take it farther. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do we know when, I guess that's what he's saying, how do you know when you've taken it far enough? How do I know where I'm getting that something? Maybe that's what we need to show, visually, is like, here's what I'm talking about,
Yeah, I could show a couple things. I think if you have a storyteller's instincts, when you have a beginning, middle, and end. And you seek that. As a magazine photographer, I've been trained for years and years and years to get the lead photo, to get the picture that launches this whole thing, that announces this is what this person and the story is about. And oftentimes, I have to be honest too, journalism, when you seize on a subject matter, someone, the story might not be so much specifically about them, but they become a vehicle for you to sort of take a look at a larger issue. Their life is typical of this 16-year-old in a high school in St. Louis is going through things that are typical of all 16-year-olds. And so you zero in on an individual's life, but that individual represents much larger concerns.
Right, yeah.
So there's an interest, in following this person and seeing where their life goes. I have a thing I guess I could show. Can you guys pull up my computer perhaps?
I'm still connected? Yeah, it's like you're connected.
Do this. There's just a couple of stories here that I isolated. I spent a lot of time in China. I've worked with little gymnasts. And this one little girl struck me as having a particular amount of spunk. And so I worked with her instructors and I got permission from her family. And this is her training. In China, kids get sent to things called spare time schools, which are really full-time schools that are devoted to developing them as sports people, be they wrestlers or gymnasts or whoever. And this little girl, China has a great tradition of wonderful gymnasts, and it's a hard thing to do. So she goes to this school full time. So I asked permission, and then I started spending time with her. And through my translator, I said, here's the best thing you can do. Ignore me. And that is a great gift that someone can give to you. And kids can do that. Kids can kind of this is the one setup picture I did for the whole thing. I did the whole array of sports at the school, and she is front and center. But everything else, and that's the only picture I use the light on, by the way, too. FYI, it's all available light. The training. You have to see how hard it is for these kids. You have to feel their pain photographically. The details of it. When you're doing a story about someone, an editor I used to work for called it peeling an onion. You just peel back the layers. You get further and further. Lunch. Okay, you follow her through the day. There's a pace to someone's life. And by simple observation of the easiest things you could imagine, sitting on a bed. I like this picture. It's very evocative to me because that's her room. She shares it with 3 other girls, at this school. Her Little Mermaid blanket, you know, and then going home, she gets a chance to go home once a week, and her family runs a restaurant. So that one day off from school, she's working in the restaurant. There she is sweeping up with all the chefs and stuff, you know. She's got a baby brother. So you want to show that, you know, it's like, these are things like, well, I don't think that's all that important. I have a baby brother. Oh, yes, it is important.
Oh, yeah, it is.
I want to see that. I want to see your family unit. And then she's back to school with her mom.
And you know, you're showing an interest in them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it's a genuine interest in them, and they're showing an interest back in helping you create that image.
Well, yeah, and also she is a vehicle for a larger issue in China, the raising up of these, and there is some controversy about it too, because it's a very strict regime that these kids go through to become these world-class gymnasts. You know, and I'll quickly go through this. This was another story. This is kind of an exercise in scale. I shot for Sports Illustrated, and as you'll see in the story, I get closer and closer and closer. This is called the Futurity, which is a big cutting horse contest. It's like the Super Bowl of cutting. So you have to show the arena. You have to set the stage. So you want to get an overall, and then you want to get an interesting detail. The salient part of this picture is the flag in the corner. Without the flag, you don't know you're in Texas. Yeah. You know, so these are physical totems that you're offering your viewer that shows who, what, when, where, why, and how. And then the emotions, hopefully, if you've done your job effectively, flow from the completeness of this. So here's the activity of the cutting horse getting tighter and tighter and tighter, strength of the horse, etc. Okay, and there. All right, so the little human moments prior to a competition, you know. Cowboy with his baby in the stands, waiting his turn to compete, you know. Fans in the stands. Cowboys, you know, at this thing are just like a bunch of prom queens. They're looking to see the cut list, who made the cut, you know, and they're very style conscious, you know, they want to look good out there. So you cover that, right? Then you cover the details of all those accoutrements, those things that signify cowboy. And then, you know, angularity of it, and then the business of it. You have to cover the aspects of the business of it, the horse sales, the auctions, etc. The details of getting the horses ready, you know, and then then I took it further. I went out onto the plains. Whoops.
What the heck, Joe?
What? There it is. The computer made it disappear. You go out. What are these horses good for? They're out in the rodeos and the roundups, out there working. And then I did another component of it, and this is something that you can do that this kind of forces you to push all of your skills out there. I got bored with watching the horses and the cows go back and forth, so I was able to set up a little studio in a men's room. And I started asking cowboys to come by. I just would go up to them.
Sure you did, Joe.
Yeah, I did. I said, hey.
Come by the men's room. Meet me there.
And I set up the studio.
Hey, can we go back to that shot, Joe, just the one previously?
Sure.
That guy's face. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yep.
That guy's face. Look at that guy's face. You can look at him, and if you met him and he walked by you, you could make a judgment about this guy. He looks like he's kind of tough. Mm-hmm. He looks like he's had an interesting kind of life. His facial expression, because, the lighting's nice, Joe. You're not bad with the light. His outfit is probably what everybody else was wearing.
Pretty much.
But the look in his face, that's who he is. You know who he is just by looking at that. That's pushing it further.
These folks, when you get them in front of the camera, they tend to become iconic, and you can identify. You identify those faces. You look at someone who's going to be comfortable in their own skin, like this cowgirl. She was a champion cowgirl, and she got in front of the camera. You look at this picture, and I've always liked this picture because you look at her and say, this is not somebody to mess with. Mm-mm. You know, she has got confidence in front of the camera, confidence in her life, etc. And then you end up with the winner of the whole deal, and the story has it's like an engine and a whole bunch of pistons are firing at once, and that's what you do to intrigue and excite the reader. Readers, you're asking them for their time to get involved with what you have done. So your stuff better be darn good.
Yeah.
You know,
Joe, we have a lot of people asking kind of the same thing, and what they're saying is, and I'm looking at a whole bunch of these. I'm just going to encapsulize it. Can you show us one? And you might have to do this on a break or something, but where you got close. This isn't the shot that I would ever show in my portfolio.
okay.
Here's the one I did use, and here's one that was close, but here's why this doesn't work. I don't know if you, because I mean, if you're like me, I have a lot of finished photos on here. I don't have a lot of ones that were ones, but like, I think if we could show them, here's 4 or 5 shots I did, but they weren't giving me what I wanted. Because I think if we can see what doesn't work, it might help us.
Okay. Well, I've got a lot of pictures that don't work.
Oh, dude. If you ever want to run that gambit, I can trump you there. There's the one thing I can beat you in. Photos that don't work. I've got that market cornered. But a lot of people are saying kind of the same things. Kara Parker says, would love to see 2 examples from the same shoot. A great one and an almost one. Bev Compton says, would you guys be able to show an example of what Joe is describing? I think you actually just kind of did talk about that. Peter Thor says, it's probably hard to describe how to get that expression from a model, like that expression that guy had. What would be nice is to see, are there throwaways from a master like Joe?
Okay, I can show. I mean, this is a little bit, like, I don't know how conclusive this will be. I'm just kind of looking at a few things here. There are portraits that are nice, that are like I do some teaching, obviously. So, I've shot as examples of lighting. I've shot, things like this gentleman here. Okay, shot him down in Mexico. Okay. And it's nice. It's got color. He's really kind of decked out and very powerful looking, and I like the picture, but it's not a picture I'd ever hang my hat on, because it's just really an example of color and light, and it's sort of nice looking. A picture I'm far fonder of is that. I shot it on the same street in Mexico. I saw this lady, okay, walking down the street, and I just asked her to pose for me. She didn't know me from Adam. And I said through my interpreter, I don't speak Spanish. I said, could you just tell her that I think she's beautiful? And I'm far more fond of this picture than I am of something like that. As nice as this gentleman is, and I have nothing against him, he was working with me, but I never got there with him. Really, it's kind of.
I don't know, Joe. That was a pretty good shot to me.
But I far prefer something like that. This lady, I mean, those are hard-won lines. This lady has lived life, and I had an immediate simpatico with her.
But you know what? Look at that shot of her. You can tell a lot about her by looking at that shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
and you can kind of tell. And you kind of mentioned this. Someone's smile tells you something about them. Her smile tells you a lot about her, the look in her eyes, even the way she holds her head and all that, Mm-hmm.
And also I think inside of her head, there's a bit of pleasure going on because someone's paying attention to her. And let's face it, we all like that. And someone says, you're beautiful, you're interesting, I'd really like to photograph you, And some people will say, oh, no. But underneath, there's something in there that just kind of triggers. And I think I maybe see that a little bit in her eyes, that she's actually quite pleased after this.
She looks a little proud, a little like, hey, he's taking a picture of me.
Yep.
He found me interesting.
And there's wonderful, images that you can shoot of various people. I'm just trying to look here because I don't... I probably do need a break, maybe to kind of try to find a couple of things.
We'll go ahead and take a break real quick. We got some good. I'm just going to wrap up with one question. We'll take a real quick break. Rosalind Moffat asks, how useful is it to you to ask the subject what they would like to have photographed about themselves? Sometimes I use that technique to have a subject relax, but then it can take on a life of its own, and I have to wrangle back to where I want to be. Any tips, please?
Yeah, that's a good thing, Rosalind. I do the same thing. I sometimes look at people and say, well, is there any way that you'd like to be photographed that you have not been photographed before? And be careful what you wish for, because sometimes that opens like this Pandora's box, and it's like, oh, no, we're not going to go exactly that direction. But it is interesting to access people's imaginations about themselves. And where I have found it to be very valuable is with younger people. Because young people tend to have, like high school students and whatnot, they tend to have this incredibly vibrant, sort of like wild, unformed, thinking about themselves perhaps, and if you can access that and harness it a little bit, it can actually feed your photography. And even if someone suggests something that is way far afield from where you want to go and is maybe even inappropriate, you can sort of, or again, harness that a little bit, or take a kernel of it or a slice of it and say, well, maybe this. What we could do is this. I mean, one of the pictures that I've always been fond of, very, very, very fond of over the course of time, was my favorite cover of the Geographic. I was photographing in India, and I think I have it here. This cover is absolutely my favorite cover I've ever shot of the Geographic. And I always say, well, sometimes our covers are a little kind of stodgy, This has a certain hipness and cachet. This lady on the right, this young lady, beautiful, was a star with MTV in India, and that's her traditionally clad Hindu mom. And she looked at me and said, I do my own fashions. Would you like to see them? And I was this far away from saying, no, just stay the way you are. She was kind of in jeans and stuff like that. And then I said, don't be an idiot, Joe. Take a look. You might not like it, but take a look. I said, sure, okay. And then she comes down in this cat suit and sits down next to her mom. And I'm like, I think I have a photograph here. So you have to be open to the possibilities. And that is an essential component of being a photographer. Like, you have to step on the boat and without knowing where that boat is actually going to go, because once you say to someone, I want to document your life, then you become like their caboose. You're attached to them. And if their day goes this way or that way, you have to throw your day aside. If you're sincerely curious and you're really into this, you can't say, I can't do that. I have to leave for 3 hours and do my email. You throw away your life because you've indicated that you're going to be dedicated to documenting theirs. So what they do, you do. They work on the weekend.
Like a caboose.
You work on the weekend.
Wow.
They are going, out at night or something. Oh yeah, well, I'm going to take a nap for a while, and then I'm going to go out to a club until 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're dying inside. You just want to go home. You don't want to stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning, but there might be something that happens there. So you say, all right, yeah, sure, I'll go with you. Oh, shit. Sometimes
So Joe, when
Sorry.
you make such amazing pictures. Do you generally you meet somebody, talk to them for a second, take a shot, maybe two, walk away, and you go back and go, I nailed it?
I don't know if that has ever really happened to me. Every once in a while.
Because you're describing, this process is very different than I think what a lot of us think about Joe McNally. I think that we think, you go up, shoot a couple of frames, you've nailed it, you go grab a beer.
No, that doesn't happen. Photography is work. It's a hard slog. And sometimes just like everyone else, I am out there grinding it out without great success,
How long were you at that school, the Chinese school?
5 days.
5 days?
5 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think in our minds, okay, I'm going to go in for 15 minutes. I'm going to get what I get and get out. And that's what we get, right? We get the 15-minute photo.
That's the digital world. Move fast. Get it done. Looks nice. Oh, this is nice. Remember I said last night is my old editor, John Loengard, his theory is that digital has made us too nice. Because we have instantaneous confirmation. We see it, we look at it and say, well, yeah, it's pretty good. We've got 10 frames. Okay, thank you very much. Whereas the anxiety of shooting film and not really having that absolute certainty that we have it and it's sharp and it's well exposed and all that sort of stuff drove you mad. and drove you into a state of anxious sort of like, energy that you wouldn't let the person go. You're on your third or fourth roll of film. You've shot 150 frames and you're saying, yeah, I think it's going pretty good. Now maybe we can try this. And that anxiety sometimes would propel you into carving something out that was deeper. Whereas now with digital, it's like, oh, wait, yeah, okay, that looks pretty good. Thank you very much for your time.
That's so great. I can't imagine having the opportunity to shoot there 5 days. But you know what I know? If I had 5 days to shoot there, I'm going to make better shots than I would if I had 3 days to shoot there, or 1 day to shoot there, or 1 hour to shoot there.
Yep.
But you're right. You're making a real serious commitment when you say, I'm going to capture your life and I'm going to get the kind of images that you want to make, the kind of images that you make all the time. But you're shooting a lot of shots, and then you have this, and your editors have a volume of stuff to look over. Right, over 5 days. Of course, the longest thing I shoot, Joe, is a football game. It's 4 hours. That's crazy. 5 days, that's amazing.
Oh yeah, sometimes. I've stayed with things for weeks at a time. You have to. There's a sense of constancy, and I realize that's not everybody's bailiwick. I'm a professional photographer. I make my living doing this, so it's in my interest to go deeper. It's in my interest to round a story out to its fullest, for sure. But at the same time, that's again harking back to the hopefully the wisdom of photographing things that are accessible. Photographing on your vacations is not a path. It's a path to nice looking memories. It's not a path to really deeply rooted photography.
Right, yeah.
Because, oh yeah, come on, honey, we got to go, the bus, whatever, so you don't need to go far afield. Stay close to home. Find something that you can return to without unusual stress. Because if you're placing unusual stress or difficulty between you and the act of shooting pictures, you're going to let that stress win at least some of the time. I really want to go and shoot this weekend with that guy, but he's 4 hours away, and I gotta, make it easier on yourself to walk out and access something that means something to you to shoot.
Wow. Hey, we're going to take a short break. I want you to have a chance to be able to dig up some images.
Okay.
At the same time, we have some more of your questions coming up, and we don't have much time left on the show, so we don't have a whole lot of time, but I hope that you'll stick with us. We are live with Joe McNally here on The Grid. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Well, hey guys, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Joe and Scott talking. I got a lot out of it. I know that was one of our favorite episodes of Joe's, where he was just talking about the inspiration stuff. And so if you want to see more of Joe, more of Scott, make sure you check them out at Photoshop World. So go to photoshopworld.com. Joe's going to be there doing a whole night with Joe McNally. Scott also is going to be teaching a bunch of classes there. And there's a bunch of other instructors over at Kelby One that are teaching classes at Photoshop World. It's August 21st, 23rd at the Mirage. And the other thing is, just if you can't make it to the Mirage, check them out on kelby1.com. That class that Scott was talking about in that last episode is up on kelby1.com from Joe. And Joe has dozens of classes over there on everything over on kelby1.com. So check that out at kelby1.com. As far as prizes, we got a couple prize giveaways. We had some people in the chat. So Joe Hartley has won the landscape photography book. And then, let's see, Gene Wagner has run the Platypod Ultra. So Christine will be reaching out to you in the chat to hook you up with those prizes. And guys, that's it for this week on The Grid. Next week we have Scott's back, so we'll have a show from Scott. And let's see what else we got going on. That's about it, right? So that's it. Thanks for joining us on The Grid. We'll see you next week here. Right here, same bat time, same bat channel.